Hello guys, welcome to this lecture. I believe this is I think it's lecture 7. We've gone quite so far with the course. Uh so now we're phasing into cybersecurity. So more of today will be based on case law rather than the actual hands-on of digital forensics. So get into it. So we'll be looking at digital forensics and a bit of counter forensics. So the idea of digital forensics really is all about investigation. It's all about footholding and following the breadcrumbs all the way. And counter forensics is kind of much of the opposite of that, and it's all about avoiding the idealism of digital forensics. Or if you want to put it in layman's terms, basically it's all about erasing traces if we're thinking of bad guy type of methodology. Anyhow, so let's get the backstory behind digital forensics. So, the crimes in the cyberspace are a little bit different involving computers. They require a different scope and a different method of investigation. And essentially, they have their own types of investigators, per se, that handle those digital crimes. And these are what we call digital forensics investigators. And this involves a essentially tedious process, a very complex process of complex analysis, and it's very delicate, consisting of things such as carving out of data and constructing a digital timeline that can per se try and tell us what happened or what crime was committed per se within that time. So it's a little bit different, unlike the normal crimes that we would have, or a shooting or a robbery or something like that. Digital forensics are a little bit different. And what makes it wonderful is the fact that digital forensics fits into literally every crime. Whether a bank was robbed or something, there is always some digital evidence that needs to be analyzed. That's what makes digital forensics a whole lot broader and very accessible pretty much in every crime scene. Say because well, the world is becoming digital and you will find digital evidence on every crime scene. And there is more to it, of course. In every crime, you'll find that if we analyze digital evidence, it will give us a whole new scope of what really happened. It will give us a new idea and a new eye to see basically what happened here. If we, for example, let's just suppose a bank was robbed, for instance, and we picked up a phone somewhere and we analyzed the data on this phone. And let's just say while looking at this phone, we looked at the GPS history and maybe this person or this phone went to this bank that was robbed at the very same time, then probably this was maybe the robber. I mean, think about it, right? Then all we have to do is trace out and find the owner, and then pretty much we found the culprit. So it gives you a different eye and a different scope. It sort of makes even some investigations in context a little bit easier per se. Okay, and something as simple as I've mentioned, as simple as a cell phone can have quite a big story to tell, really. Okay, and it is worth understanding that when it comes to analyzing digital evidence, it does not happen only when there's an incident that happens. So it's not only as a result of an incident response. You're not only going to be deployed to investigate only because there was something stolen or there was someone who died or something like that. It could be just a routine investigation whereby you will be issued a warrant of investigation, and for that you will be able to go and seize digital assets, as we say. You will take the digital assets and you'll be able to pretty much analyze them like so. Okay, now it sounds like I'm speaking a whole lot of law now. Yes, I am speaking about a lot of law. Let's talk about the law. As much as we can do anything, the one thing that we can never argue with is the law, because the law is the law. Under no circumstances shall you perform a digital investigation or any form of investigation per se without permission of that ownership entity. If you're going to be searching and investigating through computers of a certain bank, then you should have permission to be able to do that. Otherwise, you are pretty much trespassing per se. Okay, and in certain cases, you can have a warrant of investigation, which is issued by the court to you to seize digital assets and perform investigation. And a warrant of investigation, in other contexts, it actually gives you unrestricted access to all digital data. However, it does not permit you to damage any of the objects in valuation. So because you have a warrant and you are allowed to very much go and seize some of the assets and investigate, it does not mean that you have permission to go around damaging some of those digital assets. Because note, if you do damage those objects of evaluation, then you could have a possible lawsuit that is against you, where the owner of those devices could pretty much sue you for the damages of those digital assets. Okay. Another thing to note is that an incorrectly built timeline can lead to a wrongful arrest. Remember, once you've analyzed your digital data, you're going to construct a timeline to say this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. An incorrectly built timeline will lead to that wrongful arrest. Okay, so you will end up basically having a innocent person in prison, and that is really not a good thing if you think about it. If an innocent person is in prison, then this could lead to, again, a lawsuit against you or the organizational entity that you are working for. So we have to make sure that everything is 100%. Now it sounds like it's a lot of risk, but of course there are rewards when it comes to digital forensics. I mean, there's careers that you can build from it in it. And some of these have got, to date, some of the salaries for the digital forensics experts. There's different kinds of digital forensics experts because each of them have a different scope. They've got a different um point of expertise per se when it comes to their jobs, from a digital forensics examiner from there who earns this amount per annum, and then the highest at this point is a cyber forensics investigator earning $142,000 in that case per year, per annum per se. Okay. And this sounds like quite a lot, but then again, you saw the risks that come with it. You have to be perfect, you have to be top notch, you have to be top of the range when it comes to performing your investigations. Otherwise, there could be potential casualties. Okay, what is the procedure? In terms of incident response, as soon as a crime happens, what is the correct procedure that is supposed to be followed in order for you to avoid making mistakes with the crime scene or analyzing the digital evidence? Remember, we're playing the role of the digital forensics investigator, not the detective, the investigator. So, as soon as the crime happens, well, obviously, the crime has to be assigned to a lead detective. Okay, this is really not us, but it has to be assigned to a lead detective. Person with the suit that reaches the knees, type of guy who walks around acting smart and everything. That's the lead detective. Okay. And the first parties to appear onto the scene are the police officers to secure the scene. So the scene has to be secure to avoid the contamination of evidence. Okay. Note, all evidence, or digital evidence or otherwise, must be treated like a dead body. Nobody should touch it. Nobody should even look at it, even better, up until the relevant people arrive. Up until the people who are specifically trained to handle that type of evidence have arrived onto the scene. Otherwise, you are not permitted to even touch it or anything like that. Okay. The lead detective is going to then appear and analyze the scene. Now, when it comes to that, he is going to be very much assigning the relevant parties to analyze certain evidence. If they're dead bodies, he'll assign them to the right autopsy people to take care of it. The digital evidence will be assigned to, well, us in this case, for us to handle. Okay. So the crime scene investigators will appear to the scene and image the scene and number the objects of evaluation. So I'm not sure if you've watched things like forensic shows or something like that. You'll find that at a normal crime scene, things like the dead bodies, there's like a giant number placed to it. If there's a phone, there's a giant number next to it, and so on and so forth. That's the whole concept and idea. That's what they do. They number those objects of evaluation and they image that crime scene. They take pictures. There's a whole lot of pictures going on and so on and so forth. Remember, this is before we even collect our evidence to analyze after. This is way before this. And then there's something that begins called the chain of custody. And the chain of custody is a documentation of very much every evidence that's found on the crime scene that's going to be analyzed. The chain of custody is basically going to sort of mention who handles what evidence up until it reaches the court. This is so that we are able to keep trace of all the evidence and be able to see if the evidence was contaminated, then we know who to hold accountable for that crime. Okay. Then, of course, now us, the digital forensics analyst, will appear to the scene and perform the imaging of the scene as well and the analysis as well. Okay. And what happens when it comes to the crime scene in this case? So when it comes to collecting that evidence, there are special procedures that have to be followed. Note, all the volatile evidence must be times. Okay, so what we mean by this, we're talking about volatile memory, things like the RAM. The wonderful thing when it comes to the RAM is that it's volatile. As soon as the computer turns off, the RAM immediately erases everything. And we want to avoid this. We want to retain that memory because it can tell us something interesting that could have been happening on that computer. Or even if it was a phone, the RAM would still be a very interesting thing to look at. So we would normally take these things and freeze them up until we get to the lab. So we take it, we freeze it, we bag it, we tag it. And on the tag, of course, there's like a little serial number of some sort. Okay, we tag it, and very much everything else we bag it. And the digital evidence, we put them in these special bags called the Faraday bags, which look something like this. We put them in the Faraday bags, and these Faraday bags are very special actually. There is no signal that can pass through these Faraday bags, which is why we would prefer those actually. Okay, and all the evidence is going to be recorded in the chain of custody, and the chain of custody specifies us badge number if need be, and the evidence number that has been assigned to that bag. Okay, and then even while it is being transported, the person transporting that evidence is recorded within the chain of custody because they are handling the evidence. Okay, so now we get to the lab. Once we get to the lab, of course, we have to now perform our analysis. So we're going to jump into this wonderful room called the Faraday cage. And in the Faraday cage, it's a very special room because there is no signal that can come through in there. So you can't really use your phone or anything like that. You just lock yourself in there and analyze that evidence accordingly. There's a Faraday cage and there's a Faraday box, which looks like this. No signal can go through those. Okay. Now, note, we do not analyze evidence directly. We do not just take the disk and hook it up to the computer and start working our way through it. We rather image it, make a clone into a single file that we can analyze through, a clone of the entire drive per se. This is what we analyze and we read through and we perform our autopsy on. And we make use of this wonderful tool as well called the write locker, which looks something like this. And if it's attached, you actually see it like so. This little black thing that you see there, that's a write locker. The write locker just makes sure that we have data that goes towards the computer and not in reverse. This is so that we do not contaminate this hard drive whatsoever. If my computer is infected by malware, it should not be able to go into that hard drive and damage that evidence. Okay. And also during the stage, by the way, all the fingerprints and the biological evidence, they're also extracted as well and taken to the relevant lab for analysis. We're not responsible for this, unfortunately. We are responsible for just the digital evidence. Okay. And there's a little case study that you can just take note of. You can pause the video and take a look at it and see while analyzing through this. Try and see if you can identify what can count as digital evidence in this little case study. This is a case study about two companies, two software development companies, Codeworks and Inotech. And Codeworks apparently was hacked into, and Inotech started making a groundbreaking breakthrough in their development all of a sudden. And some of the code kind of seems a little bit similar to Codeworks apparently. So the idea is just to find, if you were hired, what would you be looking out for as evidence to help you implicate Inotech as the perpetrators of this crime. Anyhow, demo time. So now we're going to just do a little simulation of imaging per se. Then the idea of imaging, what I've got right now is a USB drive actually. So I've got a USB drive, and of course this USB drive should actually be connected to a write locker, and then the write locker should be connected to my computer, and then from there I should be able to start performing imaging. However, we just skip over the write locker issue because in some cases we might not really need it. Plus we're using Linux. I mean, things are kind of a little isolated per se. So you're going to see me plug in the drive now, like so. So just in a little instance, I'm going to suppose and propose that this little USB drive that I have right now, I'm going to consider it as evidence. So this is the drive right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little clone. I'm going to image it. I'm going to make a file that must be the exact duplicate of this hard drive or this USB drive per se. I'm going to make an exact duplicate so I can analyze it. I don't want to analyze directly and analyze this file. I don't want to analyze the USB drive per se. I want to just analyze the clone instead. Okay. So here I'm going to use the special tool that comes with Kali Linux and maybe most penetration testing distributions called Guymager. And by the way, if you do not have Guymager, the correct method of installing, suppose you're using an Ubuntu based or a Debian based, would be a sudo apt install Guymager, like so. And this should be able to begin your installation. But because I've already got it installed, I don't have to do that. But if you do not have it installed, that is the right command. It will need internet access like all the other packages. Okay, so right now actually I have to put in my root password. Oops. Okay, root password like so. Okay, now there we go. So once you see this, there is my little Guymager there. So Guymager, you'll notice that there are a couple of drives that we have there. Okay, this is the serial numbers. Okay, someone stole my USB and you find someone with a similar USB like yours, then you might just want to look at the serial numbers. But anyways, that's not what this is all about. So this is the 1 gigabit USB that I'm trying to image after all. Okay, so I'm going to just do this. Okay, I want to make, you can of course go for the clone device, but I want to rather acquire the image per se. Okay, and then there's different kinds of extensions that you can use here. Most of these would work for for our upcoming lecture that we'll be looking at, which is autopsy. We'll be looking at that part as well, but most of these work well. If you use a simple Linux DD raw image, it still works fine. You can use an expert witness as well, which is one that we actually prefer, an expert witness. It's fine. Then here, remember, there's a case number that was given through the court. Then there's an evidence number which was given on the bag. Remember, bag get tagged. The examiner, in this case, it's me. I'm going to put in that. The description, this is going to be a verbatim USB drive. So, okay, like so. And then these this part, it's if you'd like to make sure that the drive does not get contaminated whatsoever. So it's going to make use of these MD5 hashes. If you remember under the chapter of password attacks, we said the password attack string can be represented as a hash, which looks like a sequence of randomly generated characters, per se, like A365, so on and so forth, and so on and so forth, representing the ideal password itself. So same thing happens with files. If you have a file, you can actually calculate its fingerprint or its hash key in this context. You can calculate it, then let's just say you want to copy it to someone. You send it to someone and then they can calculate it afterwards. If the hash that you have and the one that they have after the copying is the same, then they got the correct file. If it's different, then clearly something happens somewhere along the way. But that's the idea. Okay, then here what we need to do here is do the image directory. What we would normally prefer to do actually is that you have a specific folder, let's say, and in that folder is where you are going to have all your digital evidence per case in this case. So I'm going to have like a little folder where I am going to be having my digital evidence. So I'm going to suppose in here, okay, this is the USB drive itself. Say maybe in here I have a little folder or something like that. I think I'm gonna have to mount a drive. So let me just do this. Let me mount this because I've actually got a separate partition on my hard drive that has cases and so on and so forth. So I've got a little folder here that says lost USB. So I'm just gonna plug in everything in there. Okay, so I'm guessing it's this. Oops, not that. Okay, there we go. Cases. Wonderful. Lost USB. So somewhere in here. Okay, obviously it's empty. So I'm just gonna choose that directory. Then I'm gonna give this name. I'm gonna give it a file name. What can I call this? Verbatim or something like that. I don't know what to call this. Okay, then you can click over on start. Okay, and once you do that, it's going to begin performing the cloning for you. Okay, now I'm not going to really do this. This will take quite a while. You'll see a little progress bar actually. once this has begun, but not gonna do that. That's gonna take way too long. But ideally, what's gonna happen is it's gonna perform the cloning, and you'll see little files that are going to be created like this: USB verbatim and something like that. E01, there'll be maybe E02, and so on and so forth, depending on how big that drive is that you're essentially cloning. Okay, and there's a little info file that's going to be created by Guymager, which has like a little manifest of that drive per se that has been imaged in this context. Okay, it's kind of like a little summary of it. Anyway, anyhow, that's fine. So now that we've performed the acquisition, then probably the next step afterwards is to perform the analysis and the autopsy of that drive, maybe to find deleted files or so on and so on and so forth, which is something that we're going to be looking at in the upcoming week. Okay. Now, what's happening for the assignment? Now, for your assignment, it's pretty basic and pretty simple, I must say. What's going to happen is you're going to be pretty much playing lawyer in this case. So we've given you a case to look at. Okay, it's a cyber case in this case. It's a cyber case. So once you take a look at it, it's on cyber stalking, by the way. It's a real life case. So you're going to analyze through the case, and then you're going to construct a defense. So you're going to be playing lawyer pretty much. You're going to construct a defense, a legal defense. So you're going to write out a document basically mentioning as to why the person who's accused shouldn't be implicated for the cyber stalking case that they're being accused of. You're going to write out a defense. So you can download the cyber stalking file. You can read through the case file, see the procedure that was done, look for the mistakes in the procedure, and maybe look for inadequate evidence that was given or something like that. Look for evidence that is inconclusive, so on and so forth. Once you have it, draft out your defense, and then submit your assignment. Remember as well, make sure that you add references. You can click on that video. It will show you how to add the referencing in APA 7 format. This is just referencing all the resources that you've researched from and everything else, just so that we do not flag your writing as plagiarism. And then there, just make sure that you format this using Times New Roman and use size 12 preferably. Okay, hope this was quite educational for you. I will see you guys next week when we are performing autopsy. See you guys.